Hello denizens of the forest, this is Waterman 121, and I'm bringing you some more Woodland Alliance puzzles today. Today we are going to cover two puzzles. I picked these two puzzles because there are a lot of similarities between these two, but the considerations end up being pretty different based on the board state, and I felt like that's a really fun and interesting thing to explore. Let's get into it. So, we are playing the Woodland Alliance. It's turn 1. Let's start by observing. Our hand of supporters, we have fox, mouse, mouse. Remember that, we're going to have that again. And looking at our starting hand of cards, we have 2 rabbits and a bird. That bird is wild, and I think that could give us some hope of getting a base on turn 2. So the fact that we're starting with supporters in fox, mouse, and mouse is actually kind of a classic thing on the autumn map. And it's classic because of Texas. It all comes back to Texas. So with this central fox clearing, we're actually connected to 3 mouse clearings as well. So with the possibility to spread to 2 of them, that actually gives us multiple configurations. 1 there, and 1 like that. And I have come up with names for all of these because I'm a crazy person. If we go like this, that's I-44, because it just goes right through the middle of the country. If we go like this, that's the mousetrap. And it's a mousetrap because it's not oriented like this in this setting, but let's say the Eyrie starts down here and they spread this way. They're going to run right into your sympathy in this clearing, and it sort of kind of puts a lid on the Erie's expansion. They're going to have to pay a toll if they want to move through you. Alright, and third, we have this one, which I like to call the overbite, because it kind of looks like a crocodile with an overbite. Okay, with that being said, which of these 3 orientations is actually going to give us the best advantage going forward? Well, to answer that, I think it's time to look at the rest of the board. Let's start with the Vagabond. We have the Tinker this time around, and the Tinker has explored this ruins on their first turn and moved in this direction. I think it's possible to sort of infer from this information that the Tinker is going to be sticking around in the west, probably in these 2 clearings, for at least the next turn or 2. The Tinker's first exploration, by the way, was a boot, so currently undefended. Let's look at the cats. The cats, we have our keep in the lower left, and we've built a sawmill at home, thank goodness. Finally a sensible cats play. I love to see that. In the central clearing, though, we have, what's that? A workshop? I don't understand. I think going for control of this absolutely critical clearing directly adjacent to the keep seems pretty essential to me, but they've decided to build the recruiter off to the left. So that means that this clearing is going to be pretty sensitive, as is this clearing. They're both adjacent to the keep. Okay. And let's take a look at the birds. It's cut off on the display, but the birds are starting with the despot. If I'm the despot, what I want to do, I want to expand and build. And if I'm the despot, I'm probably going to go in this direction, because there's no building slots here. I'm going to have to fight for one. There's 1 building slot here. Maybe that's nice to establish right off the bat. But look, there's just 4 willing open clearings this way. I think I would fill up that space as the despot. But either way, given our stack of supporters, we actually could, in theory, spread sympathy like this and just straight up discourage the despot from moving downward in this direction. But I just don't feel like that is the most optimal way to go. Why do I say that? Well, because we have this bird card in our hand. And that means that we're hoping to revolt in turn 2 in a mouse clearing. So here's our mouse clearings. This isn't even a pop quiz, but I'm just going to say straight off the bat, there's no way we're revolting here on turn 2. We can consider it, but look at this. If you spend both mouse supporters to spread in this clearing, you can mobilize 1 bird card, and that's pretty much it. You don't prevent the Eyrie from going anywhere, you've just parked yourself here. Even if you did get a base here, you'd be surrounded by a wall of Eyrie troops. It's a consideration, but I don't think it is optimal. So that leaves us with these three. Now, as we've mentioned, a critical piece of Cat's infrastructure is on this clearing. So I think we could maybe safely guess that if sympathy exists here in this mouse clearing, it could be attacked. Now this, to be fair, is probably not the best spot for a base, because we're right next to the keep, can't place any sympathy there. But these two clearings aren't bad. It lets us pressure Texas, which is also nice. So we'll keep this in our back pocket. At the very least, it could give us a supporter. And we'll turn our attention to these other two. Now, like I mentioned, the Vagabond has left this clearing, so placing sympathy there in the Vagabond's wake, generally a pretty safe place to go. Although there is nothing wrong with placing sympathy down here either. I think this is a little more cramping the style of the cats, and for me at least, if I'm going to be threatening this clearing over here, I will want to at least try and set up a block for the birds as well, a little bit, to just try and show the cats that I'm not here to end their game. I would say best outcome here, spend all three supporters, mobilize this birdie, and one other card, and aim for a mouse base here on turn 2. Okay? Let's talk about this hand of cards, actually. There's something interesting going on. We have the Tinker in play, and we've started with a favor card in our hand. What should we do with that? Should we mobilize it? Or should we keep it in hand jail? I'd say it kind of depends on your table a little bit. I would be inclined to keep it in hand jail as long as possible, because as soon as it hits the discard pile, that Tinker's going to be eyeing it hungrily. Also of note, we do have this rabbit ambush, so future rabbit base incoming. And with that consideration, I will say maybe the time is now to play a little bit greedy and do a little bit of table mischief, and actually just go ahead and mobilize this favor of the rabbits. 2 reasons. After you establish this base, you can spread sympathy here. Florida is weak. Second of all, if you mobilize these 2 cards to the outside, it will look to all the world like you have 2 supporters ready to revolt in one of these 3 clearings. If, for instance, you keep this favor the rabbits in hand jail, what I would do as a player is I would look at your the Woodland Alliance's supporter stack and I'd say, oh, you've got 1 supporter. You can't revolt. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that sympathy alone for a turn and just continue to build my engine as the cats. And then you've got no base on turn 2. But if you have 2 supporters, that math changes. Then the cats look at that and they're like, oh no, there's a big threat to my back line here, actually. I may have to spend a bird card, build a sawmill, overwork it, build a recruiter somewhere, and then battle that sympathy. So that's what I would do. Is it a bit of a crime against the table to have this hit the discard pile? Sure. But then I guess you would just try and leverage it to say, hey, don't craft that hammer. All right. So that's puzzle number 2. I think opening by spreading sympathy here. It's a bit ambitious, but we are aiming for a mouse base here. I think establishing a mouse base on turn 2 would be pretty nice, even if the Eyrie gets ready to pounce on it. There will be enough of a tempo, hopefully, to send a force down to Florida and get that going, while also pressuring Texas. Okay. All right, we are on to puzzle number 3. Like I said, this has a lot of similarities. We're going to start by observing. Hand of supporters is fox, mouse, mouse. Sound familiar? Our opening hand, 2 rabbit and a mouse. To add to this sense of deja vu, our Vagabond is sitting on the same clearing after having explored the same ruin and taken the same move. Now a big difference, the Eyrie is starting in the lower left, the cat's starting in the upper right. That turns out to be a huge difference maker. Now if you're wondering, are we going to have to weigh the same options with all my same kind of goofy terminology? Overbite, I-44, mousetrap. In this case, it would be a true mousetrap, as the Eyrie would be prevented from escaping without paying the toll. Except for the Eyrie went before us this time, and they kind of already have escaped the toll. And if we look a little closer, we'll see they've actually got 3 troops in this central Texas clearing, and they haven't built yet, but they definitely want to, and they will at some point with the despot leader. So these three are here to stay, it would seem. The next move for the Eyrie I would anticipate is just taking this pocket expand, or maybe going for Alaska if they're feeling brave. Probably here. And then just building here. But the fact that martial law has been established in Texas this early in the game actually has huge implications for the Woodland Alliance. If you look at our supporters once again, and look at this board, you're going to realize there's no way to spread 3 sympathy. Can't do it. Can't do it because the keep is here. So okay, we can't spread 3 sympathy, we can only spread 2. Let's see it on the board. There we are. Alright, we have 3 possible pairs, and for the Woodland Alliance, actually, sometimes restriction is very clarifying, and I think it really is in this case. We literally have 3 choices. Looking at our hand, you can see we do have a mouse card in there, likely going to mobilize that, and hope for, you guessed it, a mouse base. Now we're going to do another kind of puzzly section here. I'm going to ask you guys to pause the video and tell me which of these 3 can we eliminate? Where do we not want to spread? Take a second, pause your video. Alright, for those of you who paused the video, congratulations. And for the rest of you, let's find out. The clearings that we can eliminate from consideration are the top left. It's not immediately obvious why this is the case, but let's explore it. If we look at these 2 clearings, you'll see that taking this as a mouse base does seem tempting. There is, after all, a big old Eyrie roost right there. But that's kind of just the point, right? With the despot as a leader, you don't start with a card in battle, but seeing a sympathy pop up right there, I would very strongly consider throwing a card in battle. The cat certainly would leave it alone. And another point to the good, it would sort of discourage the Eyrie from moving into Alaska, which the cat would also love to see. But that being said, if everything goes right, and this sympathy is just totally left alone, let's look at the outcome here. Let's say everything works out, and you do in fact get this mouse base. Alright, what's the plan then? Well, you're going to want to spread sympathy here, but you're running into martial law. And you're going to want to spread sympathy here, but you're running into martial law. And you're going to want to spread sympathy. Oh, you've already got sympathy there. Okay, so maybe you're going to want to spread sympathy to one of these guys. This clearing is totally fine. This one, absolutely, you just hate to see it. You hate to see it. The keep is right here. This has no future. This is just going to be some dead sympathy floating around. Spreading sympathy here, again, you're running into the keep. And martial law. So really, I think the options tend to dwindle quite a lot from taking this as a base. And if you look forward maybe 2 turns, you'll see that the Eyrie is going to be retaking this clearing to build, and they're just going to camp on top of you. And likely just take the points from all your sympathy that's in their area and say thank you very much. So I'd say that this is not the best start for the Woodland Alliance. You'd be forever trying to just bust out and maybe going for a base here someday. You're threatening Texas, which is good. That would be the ultimate breakout. But if I'm a clever Eyrie player and I already have a garrison here, I'm just gonna defend it. It won't be hard. As the Woodland Alliance, I will likely be unable to leave this base without a protracted fight. So that's why I think this pair shouldn't be considered. That does leave us with these 2 over here. And I think right away you can see that each of them has an outsized impact on one faction or the other. If we just look down here at Cancun and New Orleans, this is Cancun, by the way, because it's the chillest clearing there is. Look at that, it's just down south. It's connected to these little guys. No one's doing anything but partying in Cancun. If we try and go for a base here, not a bad base, connected to a lot of things. But you'll see that this sympathy is kind of stuck. Yes, it discourages the Eyrie from directly moving in, but also you're going to eventually want to threaten Texas and spread sympathy there. I can see a world where, maybe this base is a little safer for having a buffer in Cancun, and that trying to apply pressure to Texas is a pretty sustainable effort, and you have access to Florida. But I would say more likely than not, this tends to result in a base in Cancun. And you just don't want one. You don't want one there, right? If you're going to revolt in a fox, you want it to be Texas. So I would say this is a safer option. And depending on your table, maybe you're at a table where people police the Woodland Alliance really hard, then I would say spread here. These cats will likely leave it alone for their first turn, right? They want the Eyrie to be running into trouble. But I think the pair of clearings that I would consider would be these two. This goes along with some general advice that I have for the Woodland Alliance, which is have some ambition. This mouse space would be amazing. That would set us up for a great game. It means that Florida would be weak. We're pressuring Texas. And aside from all those kind of positional considerations, I'll just circle it here. Let's take a look a little bit closer at the cat's infrastructure. That's a pretty crucial sawmill sitting here. So if, for instance, we were to spread to these two clearings, the cats would be probably preferring to attack here, and perhaps we'll leave this alone. Since we're going before the cats will probably, if they're a human player, be likely to spare only one action to battle the sympathy. And from mobilizing some of these, I would say our next target is Florida. If you were to take this sort of rather more aggressive sympathy placement, then I definitely would say you have to mobilize this mouse card, of course. But then I would say just mobilize the one rabbit and save this coin crafter for another day. If everything works out, the cats will attack, leaving you able to start that base. The other thing that I like about starting here, it actually does, in a backwards way, discourage the Eyrie from moving into this clearing, which I think the cats would prefer, honestly. For those of you out there who are saying, but wouldn't you just run into the same kind of thing where the Eyrie would park their soldiers here, make it hard to move out? I would say, yes, but Florida, you have an escape. You have a way to get out. Whereas over here, it's much more difficult to bust out. And all the busting out that you do is kind of, well, it's limited because of the keep. Whereas Florida, look at this. You've got sympathy spreading for days. All right. Those are the puzzles for today. That's 2 and 3. I picked them because they're symmetrical, but they had actually very similar solutions in my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you would choose anything different and why. Let me know which factions you'd like me to do puzzles for next. I've been thinking of doing some cats puzzles in the future. Oh, last time I did have some question of what happened, and the real outcome of this position was I spread to these two, and I was playing against the AI, so the cats attacked both, and then we both lost the game. So, human players are what I strategize against. What are you going to do against the AI? It's like a tool to just attack sympathy all the time. It's very hard to win with the Woodland Alliance against the cat's AI. Anyways, guys, thank you so much, and I'll see you for some more puzzles in the future. See you around the woodland.